Well, welcome to Perspectives online and on air from WFSU Public Media. I'm Tom Flanigan. This program pre-recorded on Tuesday, June the 2nd. So we still can't take calls or emails, but we do welcome your tuning and or logging in to join the festivities today. You know, as long as I've been in Tallahassee, this was kind of like an annual thing, just as much as, you know, the Jingle Bell Run or Springtime Tallahassee or any of those big happenings. But there has always been, as long as I can recall, some kind of major media event to herald the beginning of the Atlantic hurricane season. Now, back in the day, this was typically done at the old Red Cross headquarters, which was Kitty Corner from Tallahassee Ford. Some of us remember that. And then came the county's spectacular public safety complex out on Easterwood Drive. And so that event moved to that location in more recent years. But, you know, this year, for the very first time that I can remember, the kickoff program was scrubbed. And in its place has been a series of electronic advisories from various emergency response organizations, both state and local. And of course, we still have the Hurricane Survival Guide. More on that we're going to be talking about, that is updated and published every year. But since we do have the capability here on Perspectives for bringing folks together to address important issues and topics, it just seemed logical and really essential to dedicate this week's program to the start of the 2020 hurricane season, which is further complicated, of course, by the COVID-19 situation. So we got a lot to talk about today. And let's get that started as we go around the corner and we can meet our guests. And we got some good ones here, starting with Kevin Peters, Director of Emergency Management for Leon County. And Kevin, it is good to see you, sir, out there at the office at the EOC.
Yeah, it's good to see people in general. Everybody's social distance, that's a good thing. We're working with a very small crew here in the EOC, but it's good to see some friendly faces again, Tom.
Luckily, we have had no activations to date, but you can even bring us kind of up to date, because we hear there's some stuff that's kind of percolating out there in the Gulf that potentially could cause somebody some problems, hopefully not us. But we welcome you, Kevin. It's good to see you here. We also say hi to Sharon Tyler, Executive Director of the Capital Area Chapter of the American Red Cross. And Sharon, good to see you too. How you been?
I've been just dandy. I'd be more dandy if I was able to be here in my office every day, but I'm doing fine from home.
Okay. Well, boy, we got a lot to chat about here, too, when you guys have to equip the various shelter locations around the area. And now you got to worry about social distancing and all that. Boy, we're going to get into a bunch of stuff here. Now, this is a person, in relation to a number of public policy debates and gubernatorial campaigns, and also an adjunct professor of public policy analysis at her alma mater, Florida State University, from whence she got her doctorate, but now partner and vice president of research and policy for the Sachs Media Group and a statewide organization. We say hi to Dr. Karen Cyphers. Karen, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, as long as we're in your neck of the woods, let's start off with that newly announced and formed organization, this task force that was put together to really act as kind of a clearinghouse for a lot of different issues here on hurricane season. What is that organization and what's your role in it?
Well, sure. Get Ready Florida is an initiative of the National Hurricane Survival Initiative. It's actually been, our firm has been leading the effort for, I think it's over 20 years now. Although this is the first year that I'm aware of where we're entering the hurricane season already in a state of emergency. So certainly it's new in that respect. But we bring together a number of corporate partners, nonprofit organizations, industry experts to try to provide Floridians with the tools, resources, and information they need to mitigate the damages of hurricane season.
You have done some extensive surveying, as I understand, and we want to get into that as well. But first, if we can flip back to Kevin Peters and just talk about where we are as far as the kickoff. Because Kevin, again, as we said at the outset, there has always been this kind of, we don't want to call it dog and pony show. It's certainly more important than that, but where you get all the emergency response managers together and you say, here's what we're going to do here and there and all that. All bets are off now. what are the preparations looking like this year with that added dimension of the coronavirus lurking in the background?
Yeah. Well, Tom, a lot of the same things that we always plan for hurricane season, we're still planning for the same way as we always have. The big difference is social distancing and the addition of additional sanitizers and masks and things of that nature. Some of our shelter planning, and I'm sure Sharon agrees, is going to change quite a bit. In the past hurricanes, it was make spaces available, get folks out of the storm, and at times in places during extreme situations, you might pack people in quite densely to give them somewhere safe to go. We can't do that this year. We've got to be very cognizant of keeping the appropriate distance. We're going to have limits on some shelters, which means we'll probably end up opening more shelters than we might normally open in other storm scenarios, but give people that distance to stay safe based on the guidelines from the CDC and our local health department officials. Again, they're playing a very, very significant role in how we prepare this year.
What a great handoff, Sharon Tyler. Can't ask for a better introduction than that, as to giving us an update as to where are we with the shelter situation here in Leon County.
Well, we're working hand in hand to that man that's right down there on my screen with Kevin in emergency management. It is looking different this year. If we have evacuation shelters, then we'll work with the county to make sure that we probably, like you said, probably have more schools open, and we'll work with the transition. We've already had a little bit of experience with that already because of from a Red Cross perspective, from the storms that hit on Easter Sunday. We had over 1,600 in non-congregate sheltering, which means we had about 1,000 hotel rooms, which as you can imagine, is a pretty heavy lift from a financial standpoint. But also, one of the things that I think concerns me, I won't say the most, but concerns me is frustrating and challenging and whatnot as sheltering is. You're all in one area together, and you're in it together, so to speak. The challenge with the non-congregate sheltering is you've got people isolated, so you don't have that automatic bonding, you don't have that support system. So that's one of my concerns. Got a lot of concerns actually going into it, but we'll be working with emergency management in all of our counties, but here in Leon County, to make sure that we've got the support that we need. We're going to need more volunteers because we're going to be spread out more. If we had them all in 500 in Childs High School, you need 10, 15 volunteers a shift. Now you're going to have them in 7 to 10 schools at least, possibly, and so it's going to require more volunteers. It's going to be a shift. We're really focusing on what we're going to do as far as making sure the people are all checked before they even register in the shelter. Doing the temperature checks, doing all the question checks, and working with emergency management and the public health department as far as whether there's isolation rooms or for people that might have symptoms. And it's gonna be a different ball game. We're in uncharted waters, but I'm positive.
Sure, I'm thinking of a scenario.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking of a situation in which somebody or a family shows up at a shelter. The temperature check is done there at intake. There is a suspicion that these folks are sick. What the heck do you do with them? The storm is bearing down. You can't really, trundle them off to TMH or CRMC. Do you put them in a separate room? Or, how do you handle that?
I would say yes to that, Kevin. Wouldn't you say yes? That we'll have isolation areas already identified, and volunteers and our staff, depending if it's with the county and the school district, staff identified to work with those individuals.
Is that how that would work,
Yep,
Kevin?
agree with you. Yes, totally agree. When we have the check-in process, if somebody's screened, they have following the CDC guidance. If they hit the temperature marks or some of the other screening marks, we're going to have to separate and isolate. And Sharon would agree, though, on this, that's not uncommon. That's a long-standing practice of shelter operations. Even before we knew anything about a COVID-19, bringing people together in the shelter environment, there was always a potential for illness or germ spread, and people who maybe were sick. The shelter plans always had a process where we could take those that were showing some type of symptoms of some illness and separate them to an isolation area so we could limit the spread of any type of illness or germs in the shelter setting. So again, just want people to realize that just because COVID-19 is new, how we approach sheltering and taking care of people in sheltering, while we're doing things a little differently, some of these concepts are not new to us. We deal with illness and germs all the time when we talk about sheltering.
Yeah, that is nothing new. It's just the extent of this certainly puts a new dimension on it. Karen Cyphers, to your bailiwick here, since you are one of the preeminent data gatherers and analysis people and number crunchers and all that, what have you found as far as your research going into this hurricane season? What are the people out there thinking about? What concerns them?
Oh, it sounds to me like the things that are concerning people that we've been polling for the past 10 weeks about COVID-19 throughout Florida. And in our most recent survey, we asked folks to tell us what their concerns and thoughts were heading into hurricane season, both independent of COVID-19 and related to it. So I think folks will feel more confident to know that their emergency managers, from what Kevin and Sharon have shared, are thinking and concerned about the same exact things that they've reported. So for example, the greatest portion of people are concerned about strains on first responders, the prospect of more hits to the economy if there's business closures following the storm. But then following that, it's the fear of fewer shelters being available or fewer shelter spaces being available due to social distancing requirements. There's a lot of uncertainty about where it would be safe to evacuate to if they had to do that. The ability to care for older family members or family members with disabilities. Again, to Sharon's point, if people are distant from their families right now and a storm were coming, if they would typically have stepped in to help, is that safe to do, or would that be putting folks at more risk? And the ability to afford all of the supplies that they feel they're going to need this year compared with last.
We saw what happened in the case of, dear me, toilet paper when the COVID situation first erupted, and people just went crazy and thought, I don't know if they thought that they were going to stop making it or whatever. There's lots of trees, guys. That's what it's made out of. And just absolutely disrupted that supply chain. And now we still have a lot of these supply chains that have not yet recovered at the same time. And so, yes, that would seem to be a major concern on the part of folks as we go into this. Will there be enough, even as we speak right now, we're in the final day, Thursday, of the tax-free holiday when it comes to getting emergency supplies in advance of, we hope, the arrival of the first storm. But people are still going to be a little bit trepidatious about that. Will I be able to find what I need for that? And that brings us, I guess, back to you, Kevin Peters. We always had a county build a bucket situation, and that was a grand and glorious gathering. Let's see, I think last year it was over at the Lawson Center on FAMU's campus. What's the deal with Build a Bucket and hurricane supplies distributed by the county this year? We still doing anything with that or what?
Yeah, so obviously not the best to have a large gathering this year. Unfortunately, Build a Bucket is going to take on a virtualized format. We're going to have it web-based for people to go and learn about getting their disaster supply kits, what should be in a kit, ideas on putting their kit together, whether it's in the bucket like we normally advertise or some other type of container. All that information is going to be virtual this year. We are working with a couple of local entities, Elder Care Services and Ability First, to get supplies to some of their clients, their most vulnerable clients. We'll be coordinating with them. So there will be some buckets distributed this year. We're working with some partners on behind the scenes to pre-pack them for those individuals. So it's not a total strikeout on Build Your Bucket this year, but definitely had to go on hiatus from the gathering where we can all be face to face and talk one-on-one about the best steps for being prepared. If I could, Tom, just real quick, I wanted to just talk about disaster kits and being prepared, and just remind everybody that it's not just a hurricane season thing. We see severe weather all year long here in Leon County, Tallahassee area, as well as statewide. We've already had, I think Sharon talked about it, wildfires this spring and some tornadoes in our area. So definitely situations where being prepared for disaster matters outside of hurricane season. So I hope that folks haven't waited until this tax-free week. I hope that they think about being prepared all year long, keeping that supply kit ready, whether it's January, June, or December, whatever time of the year it is, staying prepared all year long.
It's just prudent to do that regardless of circumstances, right? You are, Kevin, on that. But Sharon Tyler, Kevin had also mentioned the partnership in conjunction with organizations like Elder Care Services and all that. That adds an extra layer onto this as well. I know a lot of older folks, being in a target demo myself, who are extremely worried about going outside and interfacing with anyone on this. So is there a potential there needs to be more, I don't know, homebound services or ways to check back on older folks who may have decided to, weather in place instead of heading for a shelter? How do you handle that?
Well, and Kevin can probably speak to this even better, with the county and through the public health department, there's a registry that seniors and any disabled can register on to let them know that they're home, to let them know that they need transportation to a shelter. I do think that we'll probably, because of COVID and the fear of congregate sheltering, we might have more people that would ignore the evacuation. I would hope after Michael that people wouldn't, that if they're under mandatory evacuation, that they take that very serious. But I do think we've got to be prepared for people that are going to need that extra touch, that are going to need that extra care. That's where your neighbors come in. We really have got to do a good job of taking care of our neighbors, knowing who our neighbors are, knowing if there's anyone there that needs help. Back in the day, we had disaster resistant neighborhoods and a great program that Red Cross had. And I know the city's really tried to help pick that back up and work with neighborhoods and preparing them. But if you live in a neighborhood, you live in a subdivision, it's just really important to know who your neighbors are, to know that if there's some vulnerable populations within your neighborhood, that you take care of them and you make sure that they've got the resources that they need. And as far as the supplies and the disaster kit, I know that sometimes that can seem like a long list and an expensive list. So I really encourage people to take it just like an elephant, one bite at a time. If you can't afford to go buy the whole kit caboodle right now, make sure that you get 1 or 2 items every week and just continue to stockpile, not over stockpile toilet paper, but stockpile all the things that you and your family might need, and to really pay attention. The hurricane guide, as you said, went out in this past Sunday's paper. I'm sure that we'll work with Kevin and getting more copies of it to hand out to people that perhaps don't get the Democrat. But there's an exhaustive list in there. The county has got websites. redcross.org has got websites that are going to list all the things that you need if you didn't get a copy. And I think it's really important to go ahead and start working on that list and making sure, and remembering that water expires. I mean, if you had water from Michael, you might want to get rid of it. Water your plants with it and get some new water, but be cognizant of the expiration dates on things.
Good advice on that, Sharon. And if I can do a sort of semi-personal aside here, WFSU Public Media has also had to respond to the challenge of figuring out how are we going to continue providing emergency information in the course of something like a major hurricane that comes to our area in the era of enforced social distancing and all of that kind of situation. We will remain up and running. We already have arrangements to spread out our staff. So both at the station, where we would primarily hunker down to have rotating anchors and reporters who can provide the information on a regular basis throughout the emergency, will be taken care of. And we'll be working with Kevin and his team over at the public safety complex to make sure that the reporters we embed over there, who are our lifeline, our link to that primary information source, will also be safe going forward on that. Karen Cyphers, talk about some of the other members on your team. You really have an all-star cast there, don't you?
Well, that's for sure. I would definitely recommend that people go to hurricanesafety.org to check out the full list of the members of the initiative, and to see more detailed results on the survey findings that we've had, find checklists that they can use for preparing their families. There was one thing that I wanted to share, though, which is that it may actually relate to the stockpiling of toilet paper. Close to a quarter of Floridians say that they feel more prepared this hurricane season than they did last, which we didn't ask a follow-up, but it could very well be that folks have been stockpiling because of the social distancing for COVID and feel like they are a little more prepared in that respect. I think one of the messages we want to make sure that people keep in mind, though, is to update their sense of what is needed for a storm compared with the virus, and to make sure that they have those appropriate materials on hand.
And I know that one of the folks who has a great deal of expertise and background when it comes to handling these sorts of things logistically is a fellow by the name of Fugate, and I think he sits on your group too, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
Yeah, Craig Fugate, the former emergency manager for the state of Florida, went on to have that position with FEMA for a number of years, and now back in Florida as a part of the advisory group that Karen is involved with here too. Well, Kevin, one of the biggest challenges here in Tallahassee, even though I noticed the city has been very aggressive about tree trimming in recent months, since they've had some opportunity to, with the decrease in traffic that we've seen around town, to get out and do some of that trimming. So hopefully there may not be as much of an impact if we do have a major wind event that comes running through here. Is how do you get utilities, particularly electricity, restored when you have a situation like COVID-19 lurking out there? I know Rob McGarrett with the City of Tallahassee Electric Utility isn't with us, but that's going to make it a little bit tougher for him and his crews when they get out there and try to get these lines restored.
Yeah, and I don't think Rob would mind me saying a little bit of this, because I've seen it printed in other media sources, but the City of Tallahassee has their mutual aid agreements. They're still working with their partner organizations, and so they're working on their plans of how they're going to use out-of-town crews. And now I'm going to go into an assumption here. My assumption is that these out-of-town crews, just like our local crews, they have the same screening procedures for COVID-19 through their employers that's going to dictate whether they can go on their deployment, that when they get on deployment, whether they can work or not work based on, temperatures and all the other factors. But Rob and the City Electric crews are working with your mutual aid partners. They're developing plans to make sure all the crews are cohorting together. So an out-of-town crew stays together and the City of Tallahassee crew stays together, and they're just going to attack it the best they can. I will say this, the social distancing and some of these things, it may slow down some of the things we can do after a storm. And I think people, not just Tallahassee, Leon County, anywhere, any of the Atlantic coast or Gulf Coast states, they need to realize that this could relay into some slower actions. Not that we're not trying hard, not that we're not trying to do our best, but because we have to change the way we do business, separating crews out a little bit, it may slow things down. So we just need to manage expectations early on with this, that things might not, what we could have done in 3 or 4 days might take 4 or 5 or 6 days. It may be a little bit slower, but we're still going to work as hard as we can. We want to make sure that always we want to make sure we can get restoration of our critical infrastructure, our electricity, our roadways, and then moving into getting schools back functional if a storm happens during school year. But electricity, opening the roadways, getting access back open is always going to be our priorities, in addition to saving lives following the storm. And I know that people are working on plans to make things happen as fast as possible, but we just need to be prepared for the realities of what COVID may mean to working in mass following a storm. It may slow things down. We just don't know yet. We haven't had anybody who's had to activate these types of plans anywhere along the Atlantic or Gulf Coast. So, we hope that we're not the first to have to do it. Hopefully we'll see how things go in another community if it has to happen this summer.
But not only that, for emergency response organizations like yours, city, county, and also you, Sharon Tyler, with the small army of volunteers that you have there for Red Cross operations, should we have fingers, toes, and eyes crossed here, guys, a surge of some kind, because we have been going through an opening cycle. There's more interaction amongst people right now, and the possibility we could have more folks taken offline, either in quarantine or full-blown, manifestation of disease. You got to be able to adjust to that. What happens if we only have 75% of the respondents that you need for EMS service or volunteers for shelters, or that? What does that mean for Red Cross? Sharon, you're already saying you need more volunteers. You may wind up with less or fewer.
Yeah, so we actually are working on doing getting our shelter training to where it's a virtual training, and we will be pushing hard for local volunteers, because we already know and have been told that, just go back to Michael, we had 2,500 volunteers that went through this chapter from all across the country. There was not one state that wasn't represented, and some even outside of the country. And that won't happen this year, because of the travel restrictions, because of the possibility of the virus spread. We're really expected to be able to manage more locally. Now, when I say locally, that means so right here in North Florida, we're one region. Florida is made up of 3 regions. So depending if we were to have a hurricane where it hit, we would count solely on ourselves at first. And then depending on the severity, God forbid if we had another Michael or something that hit anywhere close. I mean, obviously we're going to get our neighboring states are going to be able to come help us, Alabama and Georgia, assuming things aren't so bad there that we're not, keeping them at bay like we have a little bit in the past couple of months. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And we're really going to call upon our local community to step up to the plate and help, because we know that, and Kevin can truly attest to this as well, by and large, the people that we shelter here in Leon County are not from Leon County. And some are. Kevin, would you even have a percentage? If I had to guess, I would say less than 50% are Leon County.
Yeah, I couldn't. I don't recollect the percentages from previous storms, but yeah, we do see a lot of the evacuees from the coastal communities in Franklin, Wakulla, all the way around to Taylor. They come to Tallahassee. We are the metropolitan center of the Big Bend, so this is a destination for folks to evacuate to. So, yeah, Gulf Coast storms that come across the Appalachian Bay, we are typically the destination area. So. And again, just real quick, wanted to hit on that too, that bit about evacuations and who evacuates. Our evacuation zones in Florida and all states on the Atlantic and Gulf Coast are based on the threat from storm surge. So back to what some of the things Sharon was mentioning earlier about evacuations. It's very important for people during hurricane situations, number one, to know where they live and know their evacuation zone, and pay very close attention.
I lost his audio.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get that back on there. Hold up a second, Kevin. We'll see if your mouth can catch up to your silence there in just a moment. Let's see. Can you hear me, Kevin? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Okay, all right. Well, he can hear that. We'll see if we can recapitulate that. Along the lines of evacuation, though, Karen Cyphers, this would fall into your bailiwick. Has your research determined that there is more hesitancy on the part of folks, perhaps?
To the messages from their local officials about...
There we go. Okay, all right. We know that it's just lagging a little bit there. Karen, but any additional reluctance on the part of folks to evacuate given current situations?
So about 40% of Floridians in this most recent survey said they would have hesitation to evacuate based on uncertainty about which geographic areas are safe to go to based on COVID-19. But we did ask a historical question too. So among those Floridians who have lived in a place where they were recommended or required to evacuate in the past, close to half, 47%, said they have ignored those evacuation orders and stayed put. So we know that there's definitely the history of doing so. We did not see a difference in that response by age in any significant way. So the younger Floridians, older Floridians, possibly representing those with more experience or less experience with hurricanes, sort of all behaved the same way with that question. So there's certainly a reluctance on the part of many to leave, even if they're told to do so.
And conventional wisdom seems to be that unless you are in a storm surge prone area or a floodplain or something that would put you in really imminent danger during a storm, sometimes your best thing is to, again, if you have a reinforced shelter like the Red Cross offers, that's one thing. But for most people, just sheltering in place may be the option of choice anyway. Kevin, agree?
Yeah, that's generally what there's kind of a little catchphrase. I think our friends at the National Weather Service came up with this one. It's run from the water, hide from the wind. So if you live in particularly a more modern construction home, more modern building codes, you're not in a flood zone, and you're outside a hurricane storm surge zone, quite often you will be safe in your own home. Obviously, you want to react just like you would under severe thunderstorm or tornado conditions. Get to an interior room, lowest level of the home, away from all your exterior windows and doors. Find your safe room and shelter through the passage of the storm.
Okay, which makes good sense. But again, if you have enough lead time and you have any doubts in that, then Sharon Tyler, it's kind of up to the folks in the Red Cross and their shelters to come to the rescue and say, hey, folks, you know, if you have any doubts, come on, we'll do our best for you.
Well, us in the counties that we work with are always going to be able to, hopefully, to provide safe places, safe harbors, areas of places of last resort for people to go to in the time of need.
But our coastal counties, really, I'm thinking, does Franklin even have a Red Cross shelter? Last I heard, no.
No, Franklin
no.
isn't. We're not allowed to shelter for a hurricane. Now, obviously, for tornadoes, for the wildfires, and for other events like that, yes, we can shelter in Franklin County. But for hurricanes, no.
They come here, right, Kevin?
That's right, yeah, and it's that risk of storm surge in Franklin County. There's just the way that the county is populated, where people live, right there along the coastal areas. There's no real inland population. It's all, I think, state and federal forest land for the most part. Almost everywhere that's populated in Franklin County is subject to storm surge at some point during a hurricane landfall. So, like Sharon said, you can't have a safe shelter in Franklin County because of the risk that it could get washed through from the onslaught of the water during the hurricane.
Yes. Same is true for parts of Wakulla County as well. And obviously Gulf County, any of our coastal counties, there's going to be areas of the counties where we can't shelter at all for hurricanes.
Okay. It makes perfect sense. Well, Karen Cyphers, with all the research that you've been doing and the tracking of public opinion through that, besides the interesting fodder it provides us for debating this topic here today on perspectives, where does that information go to, and how does it play into larger public policy considerations? Like if you go to someone like Governor DeSantis and say, hey, here's what people are thinking and saying, and maybe the state needs to change its policy or evacuation routes or whatever that information seems to indicate.
Sure. Well, two things come to mind about that. First, we see that Floridians have a whole lot of confidence, a lot like 78% express confidence in state emergency preparedness and management response. So certainly people will be listening to those sources and putting a lot of stock in what they say. One of the things that I think we see year in and year out in these surveys, which we've been doing for quite a while now, is that there's some misperceptions about what's safe. Before a storm in terms of preparing your home, and then after a storm. For example, misinformation about what is a safe method of protecting your windows, whether with shutters versus tape or leaving them open, for example. But the one that really gets my interest a lot is the possibility of educating people more about safe generator use following a storm before power is restored. About a quarter of those in our survey this most recent time identified an unsafe spot as safe for using a generator. So the safe answer is that there's no indoor area whatsoever that is safe to use one. for the risk of carbon monoxide poisoning, fires and whatnot. But plenty of people select things like garage, balcony, attic. Any room with an open window is a response that we've seen. So I think it's important that our collective effort is to make sure that people are aware of what can keep them safe during and after.
It sounds like still the biggest problem is no one reads the owner's manual on these things, because certainly there's an abundance of cautionary tales in, whether it's Genelec or whatever company it is. I've seen those things in it. Do not do this, do not do that. No, don't stash it in your garage. That is not a good thing to do. So, and we always, Kevin Peters, have to run usually EMS to a number of people when any storm comes through and people hit those backup generators that get contaminated with carbon monoxide, and they have to run them to the hospital.
Yeah, we certainly see our fair share of post-impact injuries and illnesses. And, the carbon monoxide poisoning from generators, we definitely see that. Other things, just on the topic of the post-storm, it's people, overheating, overexertion, following a storm, trying to get cleaned up. Another is, just injuries related to debris clearing, whether it's accidents with chainsaws or accidents with tree limbs or trees that they're trying to cut with a chainsaw. Sometimes these even result in death. We haven't seen that in Leon County during our past storms, but I know that some of the aftermath of Michael, some people were killed, in some of these accidents where they were trying to clean up or they overexerted. So there's a whole bunch of things that could happen to you after a storm. We just, encourage everybody to, like on the generators, read the operator's instructions and follow safe procedures with the device, whether it's the generator or the chainsaw. And if you don't have a lot of experience using the chainsaw, or you're not really sure about cutting up trees or tree limbs, you might be better off hiring a professional, a licensed insured professional, to take care of some of that tree stuff and try and stay safe following the storm.
Yeah, it's the old North Florida adage, time to get out the chainsaw, hold my beer. It's usually not a good thing. You are watching and listening to a special edition of Perspectives from WFSU Public Media as we kick off the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season with the overlay of the COVID-19 pandemic to further complicate our lives. Now, if you miss all or part of the Perspectives program, it's always available online. We keep them in perpetuity just about on our WFSU Public Media Facebook page. It is also up on our WFSU.org website, at least the audio portion. You can just go to that and click on radio, pull down local programs, and boy, Perspectives is right up there. You can click on that and listen to it again and again. Our special guest, Kevin Peters, Director of Emergency Management for Leon County; Sharon Tyler, Executive Director, Capital Area Chapter, American Red Cross; and Dr. Karen Cyphers, Partner and VP of Research and Policy for the Sachs Media Group, and involved with a statewide organization that is helping to track some of the public perceptions when it comes to such things as hurricanes combined with the coronavirus. Sharon Tyler, how many, as we sit here today, how many locations do you have? I mean, at max need, could the Capital Chapter American Red Cross provide here in Leon County? How many are we looking at?
So it depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking pre-storm, pre-landing, which we call our risk shelters, we partner with the county and use the schools, because the schools are all up to code. There's going to be the safest place. Right now, there's at least 7 on their list that they would open, which is the number that we've used in the past. But as Kevin was alluding to earlier, the capacity is going to be smaller, as far as the number that are allowed in the shelter. And so they'll be opening up more of the schools that we have than we have probably in the past. If we were to have another Michael come through or another Irma, where we sheltered thousands initially during Irma, and then when Irma didn't hit us, thankfully, and went elsewhere, we were able to close those fairly rapidly. But and then we have what's called a transition. After the storm's passed and the conditions are safe, then we transition into what's called a host shelter. And that's when we kind of take over from the county, and we move as soon as possible the people out of the schools into our more traditional shelter places like churches, community centers, etc. So we're really working with our local hotels, getting partnerships there, because with our local campgrounds, anything that we can do that's going to be a non-congregate sheltering situation is what we would want to move into, to where we can keep people safe and isolated and keep the social distancing. Because for us, like for a pre-landfall, back in before COVID, I think it was, Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was 20 square foot per person that we had to have for a pre-landfall. Now we want at least 60 square feet per person pre-landfall, and then for our host sheltering it goes to 110 square, because by then the storms passed, and so we're not in that dire moment of really trying to just save lives and get people out of the storm's way. We're at a place where, okay, people still need a place to stay. Let's get them as safe as possible. And so thus the use of trying to partner with hotels and other means, as opposed to our traditional congregate sheltering.
Okay. And Kevin, does that make it easier now that the latest data that I saw out of Visit Florida, even though 13% of Americans now say they would come to Florida if they had their druthers given the opportunity to do any traveling out of their own state, it would seem likely that we will have a pretty good capacity for local hotels and motels, given the situation that we just do not have the visitors that we used to. I see he dropped off there for a second. We'll see if we can reconnect to Kevin. Peter,
I do want to say something on that real quick, though. So part of it is going to depend on what happens with our colleges, because as you know, in the fall, which is our time, August, September, October, especially September, are more, October lately, for our storms. If universities are back in, if Florida State and FAMU are playing again, then that creates a challenge with the hotels. So, we're taking all that into consideration when we look and try to partner with folks. All of that, again, it's uncharted waters for us, for the universities, for everybody. So it's great that everybody's working together and talking now.
Yeah, just this week, the Board of Governors started that discussion, getting up with the various university presidents to say, okay, how are we going to pull this off? And will it be a sequential kind of thing where there's a slight opening, or you'll do the first half of the semester virtual the way that you have been, or exactly what goes on there? And Karen, does that add to the kind of complexity of this whole data tracking that you guys are doing, that we have a moving target? All of this stuff changes almost, if not day by day, certainly week by week. And so what people were saying a month ago may no longer be true today.
That's correct. In the normal course of our year, we have a survey of 1,000 or more Floridians launched once a month. And that's a pretty good interval for us to track trends. But as I said before, we've been in the field every week for the past 10 or 11 now, simply because you're right, things are changing rapidly. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of, everything is different. So yeah, we will continue to be in the field regularly, or more regularly now, to try to get a grip of what's going on, what people are thinking.
Okay, and welcome back, Kevin. Good to have you. We love Zoom. Oh, for crying out loud, what a platform. When it works, it is wonderful and dynamic and very, very helpful. For the constituent membership, let's put it that way, out at the Emergency Operations Center, police, sheriff's office, fire, EMS, all of the other medical services, all of those people, that complicates you guys' lives as well, Kevin, because you have to have now ongoing communication. It's not like, hey, we handled Michael, we have this down. This is totally different this year. Yeah,
well, I guess kind of the blessing and the curse. is that we've been talking a lot with a lot of our partners since probably March 2nd due to COVID. We've had routine conference calls with our normal players in the Emergency Operations Center, whether it's our first responders or some of our emergency response agencies. We've had community partner calls, healthcare sector calls, hospitals, long-term care calls. So we've been communicating a lot with folks. So there's a lot of already dialogue. We're already been talking about a lot of things we're going to do. As far as in the Emergency Operations Center direct, as we've seen from my little absence here briefly due to technology, we can't rely on that during storms. We do have to have some of that face-to-face coordination communication. We're going to have to cut the staffing down in the EOC. We're going to have to do all the things to stay safe. Before our call, we were actually, out in the Emergency Operations Center, moving the desks, rearranging them. We've got our IT people. We're going to have some of the cables and plugs moved around to make sure everything reconnects right. But we're doing all the things we can do to make all the space and get the separation we need. We're going to have to do things with a little less staff than we normally will, but definitely got the players that we'll need in the Emergency Operations Center and doing everything we can to stay safe if we need to activate for a hurricane this season.
Yeah, we have not seen the end of the Zoom meetings yet, and I'm sure, Sharon Tyler, that holds true with Red Cross too. You got to be in touch with all of, whether it's the school district, your volunteer groups, all of that, and saying, well, what we told you last week may no longer be operative. Let's get together and put together a new plan.
The plans are constantly changing, and I think that we're all in that same boat. I think for the most part, other than the face-to-face meetings, I'm actually talking to some people a whole lot more than I ever did, before any of this happened, which is a good thing because, you're getting more, our battle rhythm keeps changing. First it was very intense, and now we've realized that, okay, maybe we don't need to talk every single day. Maybe we can talk twice a week. Maybe we can talk every other week, because as rapidly as things are changing, I think, unfortunately, for me, it's unfortunate, we're settling into a more routine of this new normal, to where it's like for us, I don't think we'll be back in our building for, another month, 2, 3. I'm not sure. We have to keep our workforce as safe as possible and ready to respond, ready to go open shelters or ready to go feed or do whatever. And so it's really imperative that they stay well and safe so that they can take care of people when there is a big disaster. Going back to the trees, I wanted to say, I think as horrible as Michael was, as bad as Hermine was, and these little tornadoes that we've had, I think they've done a good job of helping clear out a lot of the trees and the debris. So not to say that we're in great shape if a storm were to hit, but I know my neighborhood, especially over off Ox Bottom, this last little tornado stuff that went through in April, cleared a lot of ours.
Well, and we hope that it did not also weaken a whole bunch of new healthy trees. So the next time you get more than a 10-mile-an-hour breeze that comes crashing down through your roof, that happens a lot in Tallahassee, kind of the way it goes. Karen Cyphers, looking forward to the Safe Florida initiative here. How as you guys continue your operation here, what is the game plan? How do you see that moving ahead?
That's a great question. I'm not really sure about that. I know that we definitely are going to continue to work with these partners and poll folks and try to identify areas of misinformation or lack of awareness and try to draw attention to those things.
And besides the problems with things like generators and chainsaws and stuff, what are some of the more prevalent, I guess, urban legends or misinformation nuggets that are flying around out there via social media?
Well, so part of me would like to talk about this, and part of me would like to draw people to go to the hurricanesafety.org and take the IQ test that we have posted there, which is an 11-question test that folks can take and see how sort of educated they are personally on hurricane safety, pre and post storm things, best types of alternative lighting, how many hours you have prior to evacuating, kind of things like that. But I suppose the home preparations are the ones where we see the greatest portion of question. And that includes, like I said before, tape on windows, garage door vulnerabilities, things like that.
When in doubt, buy tons of plywood. That's what I say. I don't know. You see a lot of that.
Yeah, it is interesting, though, that in our most recent survey, about a quarter of people said that because of COVID-19, they have put off necessary home repairs. Now, we didn't ask what those were, but some of those could be relevant, and certainly, leading into hurricane season, it would be great if folks got those done if they're able to, given all the financial constraints and everything else that we have going on right now.
Most of your home repair and improvement places around town, your Home Depots and Lowe's, they seem to have no lack of business right now, except a lot of it seems to be more garden oriented than perhaps home improvement. So might be a good situation on that. Folks, we got less than 5 minutes in the program. Let's do a quick round robin, and in about a minute or so, Kevin Peters, if you could give us some final words of wisdom, some thoughts here on, again, individual household storm preparation and what people should do to stay up to date on this ever-changing confluence of hurricane threat and a pandemic at the same time.
Yeah, well, definitely, you want to make sure you have your 2020 disaster survival guide, and I know you can't read it here, but this is the back cover. It has, because I know you have listeners that are outside of Leon County, the back cover of the disaster survival guide has the contacts for our county emergency management agencies that surround us in the state of Florida. So if you've got a copy of this and you don't live in Leon County, you can get that number and call your local emergency manager if you have any questions about being prepared in your community or any of the questions that we've discussed on this call. It also has information on how to contact Sharon with the Red Cross or the Red Cross, including Sharon, and other partners to help you answer any questions you have about preparedness following this conversation. So that's one. All the information about getting prepared is in the disaster survival guide. You want to make sure you read through it. We have all the build your bucket tips are in there, what should be in a kit. All hazards too. It's not just hurricanes. It's severe weather. It's wildfires, hazardous materials. It's a really good guide. If you don't have a copy of it, you can get one online at www.haveahurricaneplan.com. And for those that live in Leon County, I'd encourage you to download the Leon County Citizens Connect app. It's available for Apple and Android devices. You get 24-hour-a-day updates from emergency management during hurricane season or all year long. We're going to send it through that app.
Very good. Thank you, Kevin Peters. Sharon Tyler, final thoughts from you.
Okay, well, I'm going to do my plug as well. So we have an app. It's a free emergency app, Red Cross emergency app. It's going to cover every kind of disaster that you can think of. I just pulled mine up, and it's got coronavirus safety. But what the app does, it's literally help at your fingertips. I love the hurricane guide, but you may not have it at your hand, but we all got our cell phones with us. And this tells you what to do before, during, and after the hurricane. And I think those are, and not just hurricanes, like I said, any disaster. I think Karen's hit on it a lot, though. The home preparedness is really important. And then afterwards, this is going to talk about when to turn your gas on, or whether you should even turn your gas on, or whether you contact the gas company. It's going to walk you through all those steps. We also have quizzes, preparedness quizzes on there as well. So I think that there's no excuse for any Floridian to not be prepared. But between all the different apps that we all have, all the information that's available, there's just not an excuse. And if for some reason anybody's having trouble getting prepared or has questions, please call us. We're always open. Even if the front door's closed, we're always here. We're always available to help and be ready to assist in times of disaster.
Thanks to you and all the Red Cross volunteers, Sharon Tyler. Karen Cyphers, you get the last word.
I want to thank everyone for all the participants in our surveys, for starters, for offering your opinions and giving us your insights and letting us draw some conclusions from those. Also want to thank the partners of Get Ready Florida, including the Fair Foundation, Rebuild 850, the FIU International Hurricane Resource Center, Salvation Army, Craig Fugate, and so on for all the support and insights and leadership on your issues. So
Thank you so much, Karen. We appreciate it. And thanks to all members of our panel here on our virtual perspectives from WFSU Public Media, which produced the same. Thanks to Taylor Cox, Paul Dam, Amy Diaz de Villegas, Tricia Moynihan, Lydell Rawls, also our Director of Content, Kim Kelling, for setting up our program interfaces. And I'm Tom Flanigan. We invite you back again next week. More thought-provoking conversation here on Perspectives from WFSU Public Media. Take care.